everybody, this is Jesse Weber, and welcome to Law&Crime. Now we have a full show for you. Let's get started with Breonna Taylor. That's the EMT who was gunned down by police after they executed a controversial no-knock warrant, erroneously believing her apartment was a source of drug operations. Now, there's been a widespread call for these officers to be criminally charged. One of the officers, Brett Hankinson, was actually fired from the LMPD this past week. And most recently, there was a large rally outside of the Kentucky Capitol demanding change. I want to turn right now to attorney Ben Crump, who is one of the attorneys representing Breonna Taylor's family. He also organized this rally. Here's what he had to say.
We are here at the Capitol in Kentucky to declare that Breonna Taylor will not be disrespected. That Breonna Taylor will not be unprotected. That Breonna Taylor will not be neglected. Because her life matters. Breonna Taylor life matters. Breonna Taylor life matters. Breonna Taylor life matters. Nobody's paying attention to it. They're trying to sweep it under the rug. And you all in Kentucky know they're trying to sweep it under the rug because y'all saw that bogus police report.
I'm joined right now by Lonita Baker, who is also representing Breonna Taylor's family. Lonita, thanks so much for coming back onto Law&Crime. Now, there's a lot that we have to talk about since your last appearance, and I want to get right into it. I'd like your reaction to the following. The attorney who is representing Brett Hankinson, David Letty, he called Hankinson's termination a cowardly political act and said that the investigations from the FBI, the AG, and the state police should have been finished first before Hankinson was fired. What's your response to that?
The termination letter was clear. Brett Hankinson acted reckless. He fired into not only Breonna's apartment, but bullets went into her neighboring apartment, as well as the upstairs. His reckless actions. The allegations laid out in the termination
Lonita,
letter
I'm sorry to cut you off. You froze a little bit. Do you mind just repeating what you just said? You froze a little bit.
Yes, I'm sorry. The termination letter laid out how reckless Brett Hankinson's actions were. That is, he fired blindly into Breonna's apartment as well as neighboring apartments. Those allegations are enough to warrant charges of wanton endangerment and wanton murder to be brought against Brett Hankinson at this moment. So I think his termination was rightfully so.
That's interesting because I'd like to get your opinion about this. Again, this attorney says that it hasn't been identified that Hankinson is the one who actually shot Taylor, that he opened fire, but was he the one who actually killed her? So that's an interesting question. What role do you think Hankinson played here then?
I do believe that it's been determined that Hankinson fired blindly into the apartment. While we may not, the public and the attorneys for Breonna Taylor's family do not have the evidence, they do have the LMPD did have the ballistics evidence, and they are able to tie that to Brett Hankinson. And I don't think they would have been so bold in that termination letter if they didn't know that information for sure. So I think that that's a ploy for Brett Hankinson to call out the mayor and the chief, but I think it's rightfully so, and I think that they've determined that those 10 bullets, mind you, there's 32 bullets fired into the house, but I think that they correctly identified 10 tied to, at least 10 to Brett Hankinson.
You have to explain something to me, because from an outsider's perspective, and people who are following this case, it might not make sense. Maybe you can shed some light on here. There are 3 active investigations. Like I said, the FBI, the state AG, we have the also the local state police department. What are they all investigating? And they're all investigating at the same time. Yet we haven't had any findings from either any of these agencies at this point. What can you tell us about that? Is that strange to you?
Well, the AG's office and the FBI both only got involved within the last few weeks, so it's understandable that they have not completed their investigation. However, the FBI investigation, I think, is much broader. I think it goes beyond just the murder of Breonna Taylor that night. I think it also includes actions leading into that.
Lonita, I think you froze again in the middle of a great answer, nonetheless. Lonita, do we still have you? Okay, Lonita, I'm
Yes, I'm
sorry you
still
cut
here.
off again. Yeah. So again, the idea, the three agencies here, you said that it's understandable two of them just began, but what about the other? Again, there are people who are demanding action, and yet they're not seeing any of these officers charged criminally yet.
We were not okay with just the public integrity unit investigation. So we're actually encouraged that the AG's office, which will be prosecuting the officers involved, is doing their own investigation. And I do believe that the FBI investigation is even much broader than that of the AG's. I think they're looking into what led up to the search warrant, itself, since we know that it contained lies, the murder of Breonna, as well as the subsequent investigation of Breonna. So I think it's much broader than that of the AG, but we're encouraged that.
So, Lonita, I'm so sorry you keep cutting out, but listen, here's the thing. This case is expressing a lot of different views from a lot of different people, but let's actually hear from somebody who is a key part of what happened in that apartment, Kenneth Walker, who was Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. He was initially charged with attempted murder for firing back on the officers. That charge was dropped because, again, he didn't know who was entering his apartment. Here's what he had to say about the latest in his girlfriend's case.
I know y'all ain't heard a lot from me, if anything, but I just want to let y'all know I appreciate all the love and support from me and most definitely for Breonna. She would appreciate it too. Breeway.
So, Lonita, hopefully you're still with us because I have so many questions. If you don't see anything in the next month, let's say none of the officers are terminated, let's say no charges are brought, what's going to happen next? What's the plan?
Well, I hope that's not the case, but we're going to continue to
Lonita, I'm sorry. I think you keep getting cut off. Okay, so let's see if I got this. I cut off. I'm going to try and interpret it. So, yeah, you hope that's not the case. But again, the city council has banned no-knock warrants. There has been one of the highest officials has resigned. I know there's an internal investigation. What will happen next, though? What kind of pressure can you put, or what kind of motions can you make, or any kind of legal action can you take to try to see some action here in this case? Okay, Lonita, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll bring in my panel who is with us, Terry Austin and Bernardo Villalona. It's great to have you both here. Terry, let me ask you. So here's the thing. You know, what can be done, because there are people who are expressing outrage, and there are people who are saying not enough is being done. What can the legal teams for Breonna Taylor's family do in this case?
One of the things they can do, Jesse, and we've seen this in other cases, is get the public behind them. We see petitions being made for other cases where the public is really basically saying, we need to have these police officers charged, we need to have them tried, and we need to have them convicted. So I think what Breonna Taylor's attorneys are going to do, they have the passion, they have a case. I think they are going to try to get the public behind them, and they are going to try to get these police officers to be accountable for their actions.
Bernardo, let me ask you, you have three agencies investigating here. What happens if their findings don't come off on the same page? They're not consistent. And what happens if based upon the data, based upon the evidence, that they decide to not bring charges? I mean, is this a real possibility when you're dealing with multiple agencies here looking into this?
It's definitely a real possibility because all three of them are conducting their own investigation. But the most important agency in terms of conducting an investigation to bring about charges is going to be the Attorney General's office, because the Attorney General's office is the one that's going to bring criminal charges. You have also the federal system that's doing an investigation, but it's always known that the federal government does take a much longer time when it comes to bringing charges against anyone. And then you have the Public Integrity Unit. You have three separate units that are conducting this investigation. So it's going to be a lot of public uproar if no charges are brought against these officers.
Well, you can understand people's frustration here when you see other cases like George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks where there was action pretty quickly. So we'll wait and see what happens with Breonna Taylor's case. Listen, when we come back, we have some new footage we want to show you and dissect in the Lori Vallow Daybell case. Stay tuned. And welcome back, everybody. We're going to continue into the saga of Lori Vallow Daybell and her husband, Chad Daybell, who have both been charged in connection with the deaths of Lori's children, 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, who was 16 at the time of her death. And now what we are learning is some interesting things, because although neither of them have been charged with murder, they each face their own charges. Lori Vallow, child desertion, non-support, evidence destruction charges for Chad Daybell. And there's a lot we can get into there, but what should we tell you? The Gilbert Police Department has released this new footage really showing the hardship between Lori Vallow and her former husband, Charles Vallow. Now, what you're going to see is months before Charles Vallow was ultimately killed by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, in a shooting event, he called police and said that he is afraid of Lori. He's worried about her. She's lost her mind. She is a danger to him and possibly the kids. He sought an emergency order to have her committed to a mental health facility. Now, we're going to show you this footage. We'll start with Charles Vallow, but then a little bit later on, you are going to hear from Lori Vallow and Tylee Ryan when they were interviewed by police. Let's start with Charles.
I've tried to support her as much as I could, but it's gotten really, really bad lately. She's had a break. She says, I'm Nick Schneider. I've taken over Charles's body, and Charles has been killed. I'm going to kill you. You're going to be murdered today or tomorrow. I can do it. I'm back there with my priesthood, with my powers. She does priesthood blessings. She does.
So who's so Nick Schneider? Okay.
That's who I'm supposed to be.
Okay. Right. Okay. So he's not at church. He's not.
She took my truck from the airport. Suspect she took my truck from the airport last night when I flew in. She canceled my flight. I had to buy another ticket. I took him back home. I've got a 6-year-old with special needs.
Right. And he's safe at school somewhere.
Right.
Okay.
For now. If she knows I'm here, she's going to go get him.
Okay.
If she says as rational as you say, I think maybe you should get your son out of school and prevent that from happening.
I may do that, but that's the only place I know where she needs help.
Yeah.
She needs some serious help. I want her to get help. I'm worried about her.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll survive this, but she needs help.
Yeah.
So that's the only way I think we can find where she will be.
Yeah.
So clearly that's unbelievably eerie when you think about what's happened and where we are. Terry, I want to start with you. As we watch this footage, we're not the only ones watching it, and prosecutors are looking at it. We know that Charles Vallow, his death has come into question. Tammy Daybell's death has come into question. Let's start with Charles Vallow, though. How does this footage and how does this understanding, with the idea of these kids' remains being found, can this tie into a possible charge in connection there? And remember, Alex Cox is dead, so he can't be charged. But this was a claim of self-defense, right? That Charles Vallow died by the hands of Alex Cox. But when you look at this footage and you're listening to what he's saying here, in light of what we know now with the human remains found on Chad Daybell's property, how is this going to play out?
First of all, this footage is just so disturbing. We know, in fact, in hindsight, that Charles Vallow is dead now, and he is anticipating the fact that his wife is going to hurt him and maybe even hurt the children. I think you saw there, he was even tearing up and crying a bit. I think that if this footage is allowed in court, let's assume, for the sake of argument, that murder charges are ultimately brought against both Lori and against Chad. I think if this footage is admitted into evidence, which it should be, it's an admission, I think that it will provide the prosecution with some motive here, some intent, and they can tie the dots between all the deaths, frankly, Charles Vallow's death and the fact that clearly Tammy died, who is the former wife, and the children. So I do think that this footage is disturbing as it may be.
She was his loving wife until she died from mysterious circumstances there. Bernarda, you watch this, and I hate to say this, it's so easy to play Monday morning quarterback, and hindsight's 2020. Was there something that could have been done more? In light of what we know now, did police do everything that they could have? Was there any way to stop this? And look, I know Lori hasn't been charged with murder, but yet her kids' remains are found in her husband's property, okay? And she's facing her own charges, he's facing his. Could something have been done all the way back in 2019?
Absolutely, Jussie. Absolutely. I found the video very disturbing. And I also watched the video, the body camera video of when Vallow was at the precinct speaking to these officers. Now, you have a man, the husband, who has a 6-year-old special needs child with this woman, telling you that this woman went to the airport, stole his car, left with the car. He's scared to death about her. She's not in her right mind. This man is giving you all these allegations, and I just feel that this police department officers didn't look into it. All they did was have a conversation with her and was like, well, you know, you seem like you're sane, so there's no reason to put you on a mental hold.
Bernarda, you just led me perfectly into it. Let's go. We're going to listen to Lori Vallow Daybell herself in this police interview. Listen very carefully.
I just think it's funny because he's trying to tell everything. Just let him explain.
Right. So.
That's very smart. Because I'm really the one that did something wrong.
But no, here's the thing: is I don't know, and I'm not going to take sides.
Right. No,
but just talking to you, I mean, I don't see you being a danger to yourself or anybody else. You got your kids to school.
Right.
I don't know, but I'm not going to play side. I'm just going to let you know that we are required, if you're here, that we will, even against with force if we have to. Right. If you're still here when it's approved, we'll have to take you to CBI.
Okay. And what is it called? I was just going to write it down.
Community Bridges.
Okay.
That's where we take you. Now, I don't know who he went through to get the order taken care of.
That's what I'm saying. How do you even get that? He got that in the middle of the night? How do you get something in the middle of the night?
It's family members can do it for other ones who have like drug dependency or not getting help, mental health issues.
Yeah, but how would he get? He had to come here. Isn't stuff closed?
It's not here. There are places you can go. So.
How would you think of something?
I don't know. I don't know.
Sorry.
So.
It's called Community Bridges. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I'm just going to write it down.
So, I'm going to...
But they'll be looking for me? That's the whole thing. Like, that's what...
We don't bust down doors to get you, but we will knock. So if you see police officers knocking, talk to them through the door if you really don't want to go. Okay. If you want a free medical evaluation, psychological evaluation.
I haven't gotten any sleep in about 3 days. They have good facilities.
They do, actually, from what I understand.
I have a gym where I could work out.
Yeah,
I'm
so,
kind of happy.
Like I said,
You'll be okay without your mama?
You are going to get a padded room.
All right, a couple of things here. First of all, it's blurry because by law they couldn't show Tylee, who was a minor at the time. But Terry, you know, you're listening to this and you hear now how family members and friends of Lori Vallow are saying the deception, you know, her deception. And here, clearly, the police don't believe that she is a threat of any kind. And yet, as we try to understand who was controlling who, was Chad controlling Lori, was Lori controlling Chad, what do you make of her behavior in this police interview when she is being accused by her then husband of being a psychological threat and danger?
You know, this is the problem with the system here. Clearly, in hindsight, she was the danger, but she is manipulating this police officer. She's charming him. She's basically saying that I'm totally fine. It's my husband who's crazy. And in fact, can you tell me, please, how did he get this information? It was the middle of the night. How did he get into this? You know, so she's not only denying that she's got problems and that she's the issue, she's trying to make it seem as though he's the one who's going to these great lengths. It's really frightening. She absolutely is very manipulative.
Okay, so in that police interview, as I said, is not only Lori Vallow, not only Melanie Gibb, who's a good friend, and she's come out a lot in this case as well, but also Tylee Ryan. Now, we haven't really heard Tylee. So what you're about to hear is a few things. You're going to hear her talking about Charles Vallow, who's her stepfather. You're going to hear her talking about almost a way protecting her younger brother, Joshua, and just a little bit about her. Take a listen.
Texting you.
Well, I have the text. He was basically just texting me.
He's acting like that my son was in danger. I was worried about JJ's safety and things and texting her like he's gonna.
So he at first texted me, "You doing okay today? Hey girl, are you sick? Please your mom. I may not be home for a bit. Love you." Sent me a strange link to a website about our church.
About crazy people.
Yeah. Said this is what's happening, and then he texted me at almost midnight. I'm so but I have no choice. I'm just sick. Danger. I had no choice. Which he didn't file a police report or anything as far as we know, so I'm just assuming he was trying to get a response, and then I love you. He was...
Police report about what?
Or, I don't know, but he was acting like he did something.
And then
basically.
those text messages came from, do you have it entered as mom's phone? Or?
No, that was from him.
That's before he didn't.
That's before he.
He didn't take the purse until 8:30.
This was last
when I was
night.
at school.
So that was from his mom.
And he was sending word for word the same text to my cousin, like.
What's his name?
Charles. And in the scenario
Just
that
gave me
she.
the purse with nothing in it. Sorry.
In the scenario that she has to go with like my little brother, would he be like ordered to pick him up from school and take him? Like.
Who the?
There's no court order, but like I know, yeah.
Are you saying is Charles supposed to pick him up? Or are you saying can you guys pick him up?
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying.
Like who's gonna pick him up?
Could I pick him up and take him back to like the hotel?
Oh yeah, I don't think that even matters. Yeah, I don't think. What school do you go to?
She graduated.
You just graduated. You got your GED.
Yeah.
Also, what are you gonna do now? Because you got a few years before you be a police officer.
Yeah, I might start community college classes and then eventually transfer over to a university. But
she's working right now.
Yeah, and I'm working.
Bernardo, besides how just tragic and sad it is to hear herself, we're still trying to come up with a theory of what happened here, and it's understanding based upon the evidence that Tylee might have been killed first. And she was seen to be almost the protector of JJ, right? And I'm curious what you make of listening to her here, because as we try to analyze what happened to the kids, how were they killed, what was the manner, your thoughts?
You know, Jussie, it's heartbreaking to hear Tylee, to know that, because we get a visual as to her character, as to who she is, a young teenager just graduated from high school, but that you can clearly tell that she is very connected to her mother and that her mother is manipulating her. Her mother does have control over her. Now, it's going to be difficult to determine what was the cause and manner of death of Tylee and also of JJ. That's what's holding up the charges of whether either one of them is going to be charged, especially since the body of at least Tylee was very burned and charred up. I don't even know, how do you even get this into evidence, this actual video taping of her? So we'll just have to see how things play out. We may never know why was it that these two kids were killed. But then again, you don't have to prove motive when you're looking at murder. All you have to prove is that the homicide took place and the intent.
Terry, let me ask you this. We have about 30 seconds here. You see a kind of a loving, nurturing relationship between the two, and even Tylee stopping her mom at one point. Is this something that could be used if, in the eventuality, Lori turns on Chad and says, I was a loving mother. Look at this. Chad is the one who interfered and got involved, and he's the one to blame. I mean, I'm speculating here, but what do you think?
Well, I think they can try to say that, you know, she's a loving mom and here's her daughter. But what really disturbs me is the fact that we know Tylee knew her mother at some point thought she herself was a zombie. And so I keep looking back at both kids thinking the fear that particularly, you know, as a teenager, she must have been going through. So maybe she was trying to be a good girl.
And what did they know at the moment of their deaths? That's the thing that's just ultimately tragic. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about Elijah McClain. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. On to Elijah McClain, the 23-year-old who was violently arrested by Colorado police for literally walking around. They had a report that there was a suspicious person. He was wearing a mask. He had his hands in the air. Now, by all reports, he was anemic, and he gets cold, which is why he might have been wearing the mask. Also, he was apparently listening to music. Anyway, after this arrest, he goes into cardiac arrest, has a heart attack, goes brain dead, and then dies days later. Now, none of the officers have been criminally charged. The DA refused to do that. The ME ruled the cause of death as undetermined. Well, now we see a new development. The governor has just appointed the attorney general to investigate this case. And a lot to break down here. We're going to start with the body cam footage. I warn our viewers, this is really heartbreaking, very disturbing, but it is important in this case nonetheless. Take a look.
Relax, just relax. Relax, relax. Relax. All right, bring that arm back. We'll give him a couple. Got his arm back. Where's his other hand? We got it right here. He's gonna bar hammer. Okay. Stop. Okay. Okay. All right. Side. I'm gonna straddle him. Figure for his legs. Recovery position. Trust me. Recovery. I have his legs. I have his legs. Where's it? He's my body. It's heavyweight team. We got him in team. Still fighting us in the ground. My name's Elijah McClain. Yeah, that's all. I had to use carotid. That's what I was doing. I was just going home. Why? I'm an introvert and I'm different. Come out? No. Was he out? I heard some snoring. I just don't like completely. Going home. Consciousness. I'm just different. I'm just different. That's all. That's all I was doing. It was actually Rosenberg. I'm so sorry. Your gun, dude. I have no gun. That's where I tried carotid. I don't do that stuff. I don't do any fighting. Other units that are not here. Why were you telling me? I don't go to guns. I don't even kill flies. I don't eat meat. I'm not a vegetarian. I don't judge people. No, I'm going to start walking away. I try to live a secret. When we showed him up, he was wearing a ski. And I respect all life. And walking, so I mean, that's on. Forgive me. Yeah. All I was trying to do was become better. We started it because he reached for Rosie's gun. And we had him on the wall. All right. And I'll do it. I'll do it.
All right, what do you
guys no other suspicious. Can you nobody else camera? My camera in the grass or
To help all life. I will do it.
Okay. One of you guys don't mind contacting the
And that's just a portion of it. Cries, vomits, begs for air. All of it is absolutely horrible. I want to bring back in Terry Bernarda, and also joining us is criminal defense attorney Aida Leisenring. Aida, I want to start with you. Now that this will be in the AG's hands, are we going to see a different result? Are these officers going to be charged? Because if so, that means the AG would disagree with the legal findings of the district attorney.
We don't know if we're going to see a different result. What we do know is that there'll be a methodical investigation, play by play, breaking down the video, the timeline, and try to put together what actually happened. Because what police are claiming happened is different than what the attorney of Elijah's family is indicating. And here, on sound alone, we hear pain and suffering that is just undeniable. And it's heart-wrenching, but we really need to know exactly what the facts are. And I feel confident that they'll be better investigated.
Terry, let's not beat around the bush here, because if the AG, through this process, ultimately brings charges that are backed by the evidence, is this a cover-up? Because I think that's what a lot of people are wondering. They're wondering why these officers, nothing happened here. And is this a case of a cover-up, or is this a case of a difference in legal findings? Because I think that's a really important distinction to make here.
You know, Jussie, in preparation for today, I saw an interview by Mary Newman, who is the attorney for the family, and they think it's a cover-up. They think that the fact that the video was not on, the body cam that the police officers were wearing, stopped for a while, and you didn't see everything that occurred. This happened way back in August of 2019. If it had not been for the petition of thousands of people, we would not be seeing an investigation, and that is heartbreaking. This is an innocent young man coming home from the corner store, not bothering anyone. It's a murder, if you ask me, and it's heartless. He's claiming,
and especially the fact that the
stop.
body cam footage wasn't released for quite some time. Now, Bernard, I want to get to you real quick. The fact that the cause of death undetermined, yet the officers may have played a role, if that stays the case, how difficult will that be for prosecutors to charge these officers if they can't really pinpoint a cause of death?
Well, that would be a huge problem. And it'll be a huge problem because if you cannot determine the cause or manner of death, if it's not determined to be a homicide, then you cannot charge these officers or anyone with homicide charges, because the crucial element in homicide charges is that the manner of death is determined to be a homicide. What I'm curious to see is that why did the medical examiner make the determination that the cause of death was undetermined? Did the medical examiner need to see the video footage to assist her in her findings, which sometimes is needed by medical examiners in order to get a determination? So I'm curious to see what was it that was missing for that medical examiner to make that determination, and whether an independent medical examiner was hired by the family to make a determination also as to the cause of death. Could it have been from the choking?
That's a really good point, because we saw that also in George Floyd. Yeah, exactly. And we saw that kind of in George Floyd, where there's a difference of opinion there. And look, Bernarda, I want to have more time to talk about this, and maybe we will, because there's the idea of the legal findings on one front, but let's just talk about the human element. Who was Elijah McClain? Well, I didn't know him. You probably didn't know him, but this just gives you a little bit of an insight into who he was. This was his coworkers celebrating his birthday.
Happy birthday! Happy late birthday! Happy super late birthday! Nice. Wait, really? No, really? I was like, no way! This is a luau party. There you go. Wow.
There you have it. I want to move on now to a different high-profile case, George Floyd. It was announced that the judge in this case will ban cameras for pretrial hearings involving the 4 officers charged in connection with George Floyd's death. I'm here with Law and Crime's own Aaron Keller. Aaron, what a day it's been watching this, because your reaction to the judge banning cameras here, considering the defense, they had a pretty interesting argument to allow it, no?
Exactly. This has been a roller coaster day, and trying to figure out exactly what kind of access the press will have to these proceedings that everyone wants to watch, Jesse. Everybody wants to see this case get tried. Earlier today, the defense filed documents for all 4 police officers saying, we want cameras in court because government officials have been sullying the reputations of these officers since not long after George Floyd died, and we want the public to see our side of the case to prevent bias from destroying this case. The judge later today said absolutely not, no cameras in hearings leading up to the trial, because cameras might see evidence that could bias the jury pool. So that was the ultimate decision from the judge this afternoon. No decision, though, yet, Jesse, on whether or not the judge will ban cameras in the trial itself.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Chances that Law and Crime will be able to cover the trials of these 4 officers. I mean, in your experience, have you seen situations where, okay, we're going to ban cameras in a high-profile case, pre-trial, but as soon as the trial starts up, it might be different?
Very, very rarely, Jesse, and this has to do with Minnesota law. Minnesota is a 2-party consent state when it comes to cameras in court. That means all sides, well, I said 2 parties, but in reality, it's all sides of whatever proceeding. There could be 3-party proceedings and whatnot, but all sides have to agree that cameras can be present. Now, how that rolls out in reality is rarely is there a case where all of the sides say yes. In this case, what's a little bit strange is the prosecutor is the one who said, we don't want cameras in court. Minnesota prosecutors have said that before in other cases, such as the Mohammed Noor case, another high-profile police shooting. But it's rare to see it in most states. Usually the prosecution says, let the cameras in, let the public see this.
Well, for the sake for our media coverage, I hope the judge will eventually change his mind. Aaron Keller, thank you so much. When we come back, Jussie Smollett, Golden State Killer, Jeffrey Epstein. We'll be back after this. Welcome back, everybody. Jussie Smollett, the actor who's accused of orchestrating a hate crime attack upon himself. Well, the 2 brothers that he allegedly hired to do this have announced that they will testify against him. I'm going to break this down. Let's start with the body cam footage. Remember this? When the officers arrived at his apartment, he was still wearing the noose that he claims the attackers threw on him. Let's start there.
So I explained to him how you were going to get something, and the reason I called him because of this shit. Okay.
You want to take it off or anything?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted you to see it. There's bleach on me. Bleach on me.
Okay.
You're filming us, right?
Yeah, this is all being.
If you want, if it's in his house,
They're filming you.
you're being audio and
Like audio. I guess when I mean, they didn't know when they were walking. Okay, so can we turn it off?
Yeah, you're giving us permission to shut it off? So, Aida, the brothers agreeing to testify after they initially said they won't cooperate, that seems like pretty huge news. So if you're Jussie Smollett's camp, what are you thinking at this point?
Well, I don't think it's as big a news as it appears, because ultimately the prosecution could have gotten subpoenas from the court and dragged them in for their testimony, so to speak. But certainly a cooperating witness is a better witness and a more effective witness in a prosecution. So this is certainly bad news for Mr. Smollet. But either way, I'm sure the prosecutors would have been able to get their testimony in court.
Well, Bernardo, this is a bizarre case considering the fact that they weren't initially going to cooperate because they said the police had their property, specifically a gun, which they had every legal right to. They wanted it back. Once they got it back, they agreed to cooperate. Are they going to be reliable witnesses in a trial?
Well, that's exactly what the defense is going to go after them about their credibility, because the credibility is going to be huge in determining Mr. Smollett's guilt. If you don't believe these two brothers and what they're saying, then you don't believe then that Jussie Smollett was lying. They are going to be key witnesses in this trial, if there is a trial.
Well, look, the roller coasters in this case, and nothing surprises me. So, Terry, since nothing surprises me with this new development, if these are the active witnesses here, is a possibility we might see a plea deal? Some sort of agreement, some sort of him pleading guilty to these charges because he knows he might not do so well in a court of law?
You know, I'm surprised we haven't heard about some sort of plea deal before this. I think that there's credibility issues on all sides. I think Jussie Smollett and the Osundario brothers have credibility issues. And I think if this prosecution proceeds, we're going to have to see other evidence. We're going to have to see the receipts and the telephone. And I think the jury is ultimately going to be persuaded by the outside evidence because, frankly, like Bernardo said, there's credibility issues everywhere in this case.
Well, you know, it's a case to follow. And when you talk about a case that keeps coming at the news, let's go to another one. Jeffrey Epstein, because a judge has approved and the compensation will now pay out in the tune of an estate worth $634 million. The alleged victims of this convicted sex offender and accused child sex trafficker, this compensation fund is now active. Now, what does this mean? This means that these purported victims can file claims and possibly get huge payouts. So, I mean, Aida, when you think about this, and Jordana Feldman is the administrator of this, she's going to review the claims, determine who gets what can we expect to happen within, let's say, the next year?
I think that they're going to try to cut as many deals, so to speak, as possible and move it along. They want to avoid depositions. They want to avoid litigation. In part, the victims may want to avoid it because they have to relive embarrassing, a difficult time in their life. And frankly, they don't necessarily want all of those details divulged to the public. And for the executor and the estate, they want to minimize the fees of litigation. And that money is better spent on the victims as opposed to, legal fees, which is how the rest of us make our money.
Look, there's a number of advantages for someone to opt into this, but clearly there are disadvantages in that the sense they can no longer file suit against the state or they can no longer file suit against any of Epstein's employees. Bernarda, Ghislaine Maxwell is a name that keeps coming up as an Epstein associate. The question is she an employee under this agreement? If someone opts in, decides to file a claim and gets a payout, is it possible that they can no longer sue her civilly, of course? I mean, they can obviously testify against her in a criminal case and provide information in a criminal case, but would they no longer be able to sue her?
So if these victims actually opt in to get this settlement, one of the requirements of the settlement is that they cannot sue any of Epstein's employees or people associated with his state. And this woman obviously is going to be considered as someone that is associated with Jeffrey Epstein. So therefore, if you take the settlement, you will not be able to sue her. However, I would just note that with this agreement, the non-disclosure is not one of the clauses in this agreement. So they can talk about it in the news, in the media, anywhere that they want. So they can take action in that way, just bring it to the media.
Doesn't bar criminal investigations. They can speak. Now, you have to imagine this is a very big win for those alleged victims in this case. Now, talking about big updates, we're going to turn our final point of the evening to our upcoming hearing this Monday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Here on Law&Crime, we are going to be covering a hearing for Joseph James DeAngelo, the accused Golden State Killer. Now, it is believed that at this hearing, he will plead guilty to a litany of crimes across multiple counties. And I'll tell you what, let's just go back for a second and revisit this case. Do you remember around April 2018 when he was arrested and the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office held this press conference? Gives you a kind of idea about what the whole Golden State Killer case is about. Take a look.
The message was clear in 2016. The magnitude of this case demanded that it be solved. There were upwards of 50 rapes, 12 murders, crimes that spanned 10 years across at least 10 different counties, northern, central, and southern California. And it was that day in June of 2016 that we, in public safety, reiterated our commitment to the victims and to justice.
Terry, I know you're going to be there Monday watching all of this. So the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office announced that they're going to hold a hearing. They're going to make an announcement after this hearing. What does that mean? What's going to happen Monday? Are there going to be any surprises?
Well, I do hope we see something, substantial at this hearing. I hope that ultimately, because so many victims are involved here, that we do get a plea deal, that in fact, he confesses to all of the horrible crimes that he has committed. And I think it will bring some peace to the families involved. And I think even, as importantly, it will spare the state the time, the effort, the money to prosecute this individual when there's so much evidence against him. So I hope we do see a major announcement that there is a plea deal and that he does confess to all of the crimes that he's accused of.
And Aida, the idea here is that he would plead guilty to avoid the death penalty. I imagine that is a good move.
That for him is a good move, where you have a case where the evidence is this overwhelming against you. And although it is in part circumstantial, it's overwhelming DNA evidence across a number of different bodies, across a number of different counties. For him, the difference, because he will end up dying in jail either way, for him, the difference is the quality of his life. So as opposed to being in ultimately what's basically solitary confinement for the rest of his life, he will be able to have recreational time and friendships or relationships with other inmates and be able to kind of live a life as opposed to being completely confined.
So, Bernard, we have about, I think, under a minute left. Could there be a surprise here? I know he's an eccentric character, and maybe we won't see that happen. Is there any last-minute things that you're looking out for?
I think, anything is possible on Monday, but the reality is that he doesn't really have incentive to actually plead guilty, because even with the death penalty, there's been a moratorium on the death penalty since last year, since 2019. So what does he have to gain by pleading guilty?
Well, I tell you, at the very least, we may learn more details about these crimes that we never did. So tune in Monday. Aida, Terry, Bernarda, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, have a great weekend. Tune in Monday. We'll see you there.